Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Regional Legislative Forum for 2022. We'll get started in just a moment, but first we're going to hear from a few of our sponsors as we continue to let people into the program.
The New Haven Law Office of Halloran Sage opened its doors in August 2011, and the past decade has been extraordinary. It is a privilege to be part of this vibrant and diverse community. We have sought out opportunities to contribute to the growth and success of the Elm City. We have engaged in stimulating work. This work is a reflection of our firm's history of legal excellence. Whether we are providing counsel to manufacturers and banks that impact the international economy, or to closely held businesses that are planning their growth. It is also gratifying to provide nonprofits, municipalities, and government agencies with work that has positively impacted our community and neighbors. We embrace this calling as a recognized public service. We've come to understand how to represent you and help you. It has been an exciting journey. We've grown and adapted and acclimated along the way, always with the objective of providing the best counsel to our client. We are a law firm that works in the present, and we are focused on solutions. Whether circumstances are anticipated, unexpected, or even turbulent, this city is full of potential and resolved to be a place where its businesses and all who live or work here can grow, thrive, and prosper. New Haven is strong, and we are connected to it and prepared to help move this city forward. We care, we understand, and we are here. Thank you to our clients, our business partners, and the civic and nonprofit organizations who have trusted in us over the last 10 years.
We love making life work.
Every complicated,
frustrating,
gratifying,
amazing part of it.
We're engineers,
scientists,
planners.
And no matter what we're doing,
working with clients,
taking on community projects,
or taking time for ourselves.
Our goal is the same.
Make life better any way we can.
We design,
plan,
test, and implement
every detail of the most complex
civil and environmental engineering challenges,
all under one roof
and across multiple disciplines.
We work here.
we live here.
We know all the local ins and outs
of what it takes
to bring your project to life.
But there's more to it than that.
It takes patience,
perseverance,
And just being human.
so we make ourselves available,
give our undivided attention,
and only make promises we can keep.
We think that shaping the places that make life work
is the best work there is. Fuss and O'Neill.
creating works of life.
If you're just joining us, we'll be getting started in just a moment. So we hear from our sponsors.
Are you struggling to capture your customer's attention in under 30 seconds? Action! At Story Reel Studios, we create videos that help your brand immediately stand out from the competition.
Our process starts with collaborating with you and turning your vision into a reality. We produce unforgettable stories that inspire your customers and deliver measurable results to your business. Call us today and let's bring your story to life.
My grandfather started delivering home heating oil in the 30s. and my grandmother did the books. It is this entrepreneurial spirit that lives on in the company today.
We fuel 700,000 cars a day, over 20,000 trucks a day, and we heat 40,000 homes in the New England area.
The people that you work with are what fuels our engine. The people at Global heat homes, fuel cars, and power commerce throughout the country.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our annual legislative forum presented by AT&T Connecticut and Southern Connecticut State University. This is part 2 of our 2-part series. Originally, this was going to be a single in-person event, but we pivoted to be able to be virtual with you and talk with our elected officials. A couple of weeks ago, we talked with the state Senate, and this morning we're meeting with our state representatives and focusing on mobilizing our workforce. Before we start, I'd like to call up our board chair, Howard K. Hill, owner of Howard K. Hill Funeral Services, to say a few words. Howard?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for joining us for our annual Regional Leadership Forum. Certainly want to thank our sponsors. Certainly would like to thank our sponsors for their continued support, for without them, we could not do the work that we do in the area. So thank you all for your continued support. Also want to thank our legislators for their hard work in fighting for our business community. And we are certainly looking forward to your work going forward. Thank you all for joining us, and hopefully you'll get something great out of this today. Garrett?
Thanks, Howard. Appreciate it. Now I'd like to welcome in our presenting sponsor, AT&T Connecticut, who has supported us for several years putting on this event, and appreciate their continued support and partnership. Let me welcome in the president of AT&T New England, John Emra. John?
Hi, good morning, Garrett. Good morning, everybody. It's good to be with you. Sorry it is virtual once again, but it's nice to do this week with members of the House, like we did with the Senate a week ago. You know, I was trying to think, a couple of us were chatting before this call started about some of the good things that come from COVID, and certainly easier commutes is one of them. I think one of the other things that I think we're all going to sort of see is that things that for a long time seemed almost these challenges that seemed insurmountable. I, for years, have been hearing about how telemedicine was going to revolutionize healthcare, and sort of waited and waited and waited, and saw nothing. And I think, you know, COVID sort of made that a real thing. The other thing a little more closer to home is broadband. You know, companies like AT&T invest hundreds of millions of dollars a year, every year, into building broadband networks. And I think we've done a good job, but I think the pandemic has helped to illustrate just how important broadband is. And I think what you'll see is some really great public-private partnerships between state and federal government and providers like AT&T to help to further close that digital divide and make broadband available to everybody. So I look forward to the conversation this morning, and hopefully next year we'll be back in person together. Thanks, Garrett.
Great, thanks, John. Appreciate it. And as we mentioned, this was going to be an in-person event, and that location was supposed to be Southern Connecticut State University. We'll look forward to being back there next year, but I want to welcome in Dr. Joe Bertolino, president of Southern Connecticut State University. Joe?
Thanks, Garrett. Appreciate it. My thanks to the Chamber and to our legislators for joining us today. Good morning to everyone. As Garrett mentioned, we were hoping to have you on campus, but I would like to extend the invitation to all of you to visit our campus and consider us as a location for your future meetings and gatherings. We are always open. I do want to share that at Southern, we're honored to partner with Chamber of Commerce and AT&T in presenting this forum. As you know, each year Southern graduates some 2,000 students, and 85% of those students who graduate stay and work in the state, and that is something we are enormously proud of. We have, as you know, a series of community partnerships with the schools, nonprofits, and the corporate sector. There are so many that again, we take great pride in those, but one in particular I do want to share is that our, excuse me, Our students, our alumni, our staff have really been serving on the front lines in the midst of the pandemic. Southern is the home of the Community Alliance for Research and Engagement Care, which is affiliated with the Yale School of Public Health. And essentially, it is that area is helping to improve COVID-19 confidence and access in communities of color in New Haven. And so we take a great deal of pride in that work. And as a result, we are also providing testing, boosters, vaccinations for members of our community. So if anyone is in need, please feel free to reach out to Southern. We're happy to help. Obviously, this is a critical part of our social justice mission, but that's what we do at Southern. So as your regional public university, please use us as a resource. I invite all of you to join and partner with Southern to help us make the community stronger and to ensure our student success. So with that, I welcome our legislative delegation today, thank them for joining us for this forum, and thank all of you and them for their continued support of higher education. So thanks, Garrett, appreciate the opportunity.
Great, thanks, Dr. Joe, appreciate it. And I also want to thank all of our event sponsors. You saw some of their videos at the beginning of the program. Global Partners, Fuss & O'Neill, Haller & Sage, Alexion AstraZeneca, and Story Real Studios are sponsors for today's event. Chamber has been able to be a valuable resource, and we continue to be able to provide programming because of our investors as well. And as you see on the slides, streaming across right now, this is our list of companies that are part of our investor group and do so much to support us throughout the year. So a big thank you to them as well. Today, we will touch on many issues related to our legislative priorities. I want to now ask all attendees, take a few seconds to text GNHCC to 52886. By doing this, you'll be signing up for our text updates on legislative issues. It'll make it easier for you to keep yourself informed and advocate for your business. This information is also up on our website under our public policy section. While everyone signs up, I want to mention our annual legislative agenda that we released at our first event. It is focused on economic growth for our region. And 2 weeks ago, we discussed investing in the greater New Haven region. Today, we are focused on workforce, and I want to thank the members of our Government Affairs Committee who meet throughout the year to discuss the issues impacting our business community. It's now my pleasure to introduce Jim Perito, a partner at Haller & Sage and the chair of our Government Affairs Committee. We'll also let the state representatives turn on their cameras now and their microphones. Jim is going to moderate the questions, and then we'll also work in questions that you may have. You can put those into the chat. We'll be keeping an eye on that, try to get as many of those across to the legislators as possible. We do have a lot of legislators this morning. I want to read off all of the ones that have accepted invitations for today. I know some will be joining us in just a little bit, but we have Speaker of the House, Matt Ritter, House Minority Leader Vinnie Candelora. We have Representative Sean Scanlon, Representative Robin Comey, Representative Josh Elliott, Representative Frank Smith, Representative Mary Welander, Representative Liz Linehan, Representative John Michael Parker, Representative Robin Porter, Representative Juan Candelaria, Representative Dorinda Boer, and Representative Patricia Dillon, and Representative Al Palillo. So I want to thank everyone for attending today. And Jim, I'll let you get right to it and the questions.
Great, thanks so much. I want to echo both Howard and Garrett's thanks to our sponsors, and especially thanks to all our reps who appeared today. For those of you who have done this remotely with me before, you know I do have a question for all of you. I tried to give you a chance to comment on other questions that have come through, but there's a lot of folks here, so either raise your hand or send something to the chat, and usually Garrett or someone else sends me an email. So with that, let's get started. We're going to start with House Speaker Matt Ritter and Minority Leader Vincent Candelora. Thank you for joining us. We'd like to give each one of you a chance to take about a minute and tell our audience what your legislative priority would be in this upcoming session. So let's start with Matt Ritter.
All right, well, good morning, everybody. And I want to say hi to all my colleagues that are on the call on both sides of the aisle. It looks like Representative Reyes from Waterbury joined us as well. 1 minute, here we go. I think it starts and stops with three things. I think one is children's mental health and that priority. I'm sure you'll hear about that from some of my colleagues. That will be House Bill 5001. and how we're going to make a long-term impact as we begin to move away from perhaps the March of 2020 COVID model into having to learn how to deal with this virus, respiratory illness for maybe years to come, unfortunately. We really got to think about our kids, the missed school time, the impact it's had on them, as well as adults. So I think that'll be a big priority. Our budget continues to be very, very strong. We are going to look at ways, I believe, at giving money back to taxpayers. I think there's some disagreements on the best way to do that. But at the end of the day, the EITC has long been something that has been considered by all economists on both sides of the aisle a very, very good way to do that and get money in people's pockets. I believe strongly in a child tax credit. So you'll see that be a big priority. The other thing is we still have to deal with COVID. I mean, I sort of mentioned in the first thing, Jim, it's not gone, right? We still have the need to respond, and there are sort of these emergency things that are out there, but it's going to move into a different phase, we hope, we think, in the coming months. And the legislature's got to figure this out with the governor. So you'll see one vote in a couple of weeks where we'll sort of do things for 60 days, but then what happens when we're not in session? So a lot of time will be spent on that. So all the chairs, I see Robin and Sean and other chairs on the committee, as I keep reminding them, it's going to be a really, really tight session. So get your work done early. And thanks for having me.
Thank
I
you.
think that was 1 minute, Jim. Let's see if Vinny
I
can.
think it was. You did a good job. Thank you. Representative Candelora, nice to see you. How would you approach with the priorities from
Good
your
to
perspective?
see you, Jim. Thanks for having me. And yeah, I think from the Republican perspective, we share very similar goals, especially when it comes to our children. The impact of COVID probably has been the most dramatic to them. We've had the most restrictive guidelines placed on them for 2 years. And we are seeing, the social emotional impacts, the disruption to education. So I think we will see a lot of bipartisan work in that area. While the budget is doing well, I'm a little concerned, and I just raised the flag that despite our surplus and we're paying down pension, our unfunded liabilities have actually increased by $20 million over the last 5 years. I think we're upward of $95 million of unfunded liabilities. So while things are getting better, we're seeing surpluses. There's been some decisions that have made that debt worse. And so I think we have to start that conversation to try to improve that, because our whole goal of that rainy day fund and the paying down the pensions was to reduce our unfunded liabilities. And I do think, we have to keep an eye on the businesses. The stock market performs well. We now have a disconnect, I think, between Wall Street and Main Street. Main Street is functioning very differently. The unemployment compensation fund has been overtaxed, and businesses have to pay that back. That's going to slow our recovery. So I think to the extent that we could keep an eye on that and look at areas that we could help our economy recover, we should do that. Broad-based tax relief is something that we would support too, and tax relief that could stimulate our economic engine, like getting rid of the truck tax before it gets implemented, so we could prevent, more inflationary costs on our goods and services. So, I'm looking forward to this session. Hopefully we will be in person by the end. I think we do much better work in person. Zoom is okay, but we lose a lot when we're not interacting.
Yeah, I think everyone agrees on that. Thank you. Well, as you know, the mobilizing the workforce is our theme today. I want to jump around a little bit because I want to give other folks a chance sort of right away. Representative Linehan, education to career pipeline and manufacturing. The manufacturing industry is one in which there's been a large focus and need for talent workforce pipelines to be supplying them. As a supporter of this industry, creating the now annual Student Manufacturer Connection Fair, do you anticipate any action from the legislature this year to support these much needed pipelines and the manufacturing industry?
Hi, thank you so very much, first of all, for having me, and thank you for that question. I'd also, before I answer the question, I'd like to thank my colleagues for listing their priorities, especially my House Speaker for talking about children's mental health. He puts his action where his mouth is. I just want you to know, Mr. Speaker, I always appreciate that. The work pipeline is one of my main concerns, especially in manufacturing. And I am starting to go around and talk to local manufacturers. So if there are manufacturers here on the call that would like like to talk to me, I ask that they reach out to me because it's really important. And I'll put my email in the chat. It's really important that we start to talk about exactly what you need to get people back to work. You know, I do the manufacturer connection fair, student to manufacturer connection fair, where we bust in over 500 students every year to come in and meet with manufacturers. And from that, there were actually some really great programs that stemmed from it, which we brought in pre-apprenticeships, apprentices, and then we actually started some within the companies, some actual small programs that put these kids through college and allowed them to stick with the company for the last couple of years. So it's been really successful. But the question now becomes, how do we make that happen with COVID? We need to get back to, I hate the term, but a new normal. And we need to do the things like these in-person events. Whether I'll be able to do that, I'm not sure, but we're certainly considering yet another virtual year where I can still connect students with manufacturers and work on those apprenticeships and pre-apprenticeship programs. Sometimes we don't have to do things legislatively. Sometimes it's about focusing on our priorities and using our connections to be able to make things like this happen. And my dog is agreeing with me on that. So I will try to sum it up to say, if legislation needs to be done, then we'll do that. But I don't always think that's the point. I do want to make very clear that as the chair of the Children's Committee, one of my priorities is going to be focused on keeping daycares open, because we can't talk about an active workforce without talking about the ability to have daycares open, keep them open and keep them safe so that parents can get back to work. So that is something I'll be focusing on. And I thank you very much for the question.
Thank you. I'm going to jump back to the labor shortage issue. Mobilizing our workforce is one of our largest issues for our businesses. With the highest unemployment rate in New England and an uptick in COVID cases, Connecticut businesses continue to face alarming staff shortages. We see it everywhere. Representative Candelora, I'll give you the first shot at that, and then back to Speaker Ritter. So as we start into that aspect.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, looking at a balance, I mean, part of the worker shortage really came in, the unemployment compensation funds have been so generous that trying to get people back to work is one area. I think our workforce has been stunted by, children being home and juggling daycare, juggling school. But I think ultimately, just what I've seen in my business is it's not just your 50-year-olds or your 60-year-olds not going back to work. It's also your younger students as well. And so I'm hoping that this is more of a function of COVID, where we just saw that certain segments of our population, like our youth and our elderly, who might have even those part-time jobs or did not go back to work because of the concerns of COVID. But I do think as we move forward, we have to look at giving some of the benefits to help businesses start up their economic engine. We could talk about enhanced earned income tax credits, but if we continue to give people money to stay home, they're not going to work. And so we've got to make sure that there's a balance between the programs that we're offering and making sure that we are incentivizing people to go back to work.
Representative Ritter, do you want to speak on that, or will you let someone else chime in? Oh, he's off for a minute. All right, he's off for a minute. I'm going to jump to Representative Porter on support for employees, and then we'll get to childcare and some of the other topics you've raised. Connecticut has launched a $34 million relief program for essential workers to cover lost wages and medical costs related to COVID-19, a lot of which is due to your support. What other actions do you foresee the legislature in this shorter session taking for working people? And you're muted. So there you go. Thanks.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. And thank you so much for having me. Yes, I'm very proud to say that we launched that with tremendous help and support from our speaker, Ritter, making sure that we are able to secure that $34 million. And I think that the thing that we're looking for going forward is to continue to address the issues that workers are having during this pandemic. And, we've been going around calling our workers heroes. So we're working on hazard pay, or hero pay, as some other folks have coined it, because we feel like there needs to be support for that. And we are in discussions about how we're looking to fund that. And it looks like we may be looking to do something similar to what we've done with the emergency COVID fund for essential workers. But like I said, we're still in talks with the governor's office around that. And then the other thing we're looking to address, Jim, this year in session is also the need for paid sick days for COVID. I mean, we know that people, you know, I think the spread was so tremendous because people had to choose between going to work sick or, you know, staying home, not getting paid, living paycheck to paycheck and one check from a park bench. So we are definitely looking to make sure that we give people what they need in order to stay well and to keep everyone else safe. You should not be going to work sick with COVID if you have COVID and putting other people at risk. So that's another one of the priorities that we have in addressing what's going on with COVID. We believe that, you know, we have to have some supports in place where people can have security. We're trying to get people back to work. We know that over half the workforce that was laid off or was forced, like a lot of women were forced because of childcare or the lack of childcare. So those are the things that we're looking to address. And childcare, even though it doesn't fall under the realm of the Labor Committee, is certainly one of our deep concerns as we look at putting people back to work this year.
I want to follow up with that because one of the things that just before Christmas, we had a COVID potential scare in our household, and I was fortunate enough to go to the Green and walk up and get a test there. And there was a young man ahead of me who was saying to the intake person, you know, how soon can I get my results back? It was clear that this young man had to get to work and couldn't get back to work unless he had a clear test. And he was one of those folks you talk about where if they're not working, they're not getting paid. They don't have sick leave. They don't have unemployment. And it seemed like that the testing issue was a real problem, getting to it and getting results quickly. So, I mean, are you all thinking about, you know, a way to address that since, you know, we're still in this process right now with, you know, if you're positive, you have to stay out of work?
Absolutely. I had several constituents that were contacting me after the holidays because it seemed that everyone was getting tested so that they could travel. And unfortunately, many people came back with COVID. And I had one constituent that reached out the 1st of January and was in a panic because he couldn't get a test until January 28th. So the home kits came in really handy. But what I want people to understand about the home kit is that it's an antigen test. So if you're not symptomatic, you shouldn't be using that test. You should still be seeking a PCR. But that has been a great help to many other people in my district, and I'm sure in districts across Connecticut, having access to the home kits and being able to test and get a result back in 15 minutes.
Thank you. Let's jump a little bit to childcare, and we'll ask Representative Comey and Representative Waylander. Childcare seems to be one possible solution to solving labor shortages. With the federal Build Back Better bill facing more and more obstacles to its passage, it seems it's less likely there'll be a federal solution to affordable childcare. Do you see anything, and I'll go with Representative Comey first and then Representative Waylander. Do you see any legislation this session on that problem?
Thanks, Jim. You know, I'm not giving up on the Build Back Better bill yet and the child care portion of it. You know, it's no mistake that every single speaker so far in this we've been on, you know, speaking about 10, 15 minutes, has spoken to the struggle to find affordable quality childcare in the state and certainly across the country. I mean, for working parents, access, and for businesses, access to affordable childcare is a key ingredient so that they can enter and return to the workforce. So it's been an issue. It was an issue pre-pandemic. I think it's certainly, we all know, and we see it's been exacerbated by the pandemic. I mean, closures to in-person schooling, childcare centers that have closed and are still closing, and a lack, importantly, as to your theme, of available workers for childcare centers that are open. You know, I was speaking with a colleague just a few towns away up the shoreline, and she told me that her region is considered a childcare desert. And she described an environment where families in her area could not find center care before 8:30 in the morning. And even if they could find it, they couldn't find it before 8:30 in the morning or after 5:30 at night. So, you know, this is all inextricably linked to parents, and especially mothers, that are struggling to enter the workforce and to get ahead in their careers. And the cost, the closures and the price increases, the cost of doing business are putting pressure on centers and businesses. And when 1.3 million mothers across have dropped out of the workforce, and states are losing hundreds of millions of dollars in economic activity due to the childcare industry breakdowns, I think we can't afford to put this on the back burner. I'm excited about the work that we've been doing in Connecticut. I mean, we're really taking the lead on that. We've been transforming the early childhood system for years, really, but specifically in the past couple of years through COVID, we have been able to redistribute funds in an equitable manner. We're recognized in DC for doing that, and getting money into the hands of the frontline workers and the businesses really, really quickly. So, it's not just a federal program. We have working with the Women's Business Development Council, who have been able to provide financial relief and capital to licensed centers in New Haven County. I think 47 grants were given out to area businesses, and we're improving the policies, making sure that care for kids, that barriers to folks who wanted to further their education and pursue careers were removed, and changing the guidelines of that. So, we got to address the true quality of care and solve some of our infant and toddler care issues. And, there's not going to be an economic recovery without childcare being a part of the solution.
Thank you. Representative Winlander, would you like to talk about this as well?
Goodness, I think Robin Comey just hit most of the high points. I think it has absolutely was an issue before. It is more of an issue now. We are seeing less women in the workforce than ever before, which has a generational impact on success. And that's something I know personally. I know I have 3 kids, and it was too expensive for me to go back to work. So I was home for many years. That has an impact on where my family is financially right now, and where women are down the road when we're looking at retirement. These are huge issues. And I think it stems from a lack of attention that has been paid for a long time on care positions. That is things that women are typically the majority of the workforce in these types of positions. I myself actually did work in a daycare center for a while. These are not well-paid positions, and we are entrusted with doing some of the most important work of caring for our vulnerable children. So I don't know if any legislation has been specifically proposed in that, or if it's being done by the Office of Early Childhood, but we should absolutely be looking into that to see how we can make a better plan to support our childcare centers, and support the employees, the business owners, because it's a step-by-step domino effect. And once we can support those business owners to reopen safely, make sure that they have the supplies they need to reopen safely so they and the children are cared for, then more people can find that care for their children. They can go back to work. They can take that chance to have a startup business. It really does have a huge impact, a broad ripple effect on our economy at large. So I look forward to supporting the work to make that happen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think this sort of also raises the question about employee advancement. I want to turn to Representative Elliott. Part of mobilizing our workforce is strengthening the workforce talent pipeline by supporting initiatives in higher education that prepare our workforce for the academic, technical, and skill expectations of today's workplace. What do you anticipate the Higher Education and Employment Advancement Committee to do this year, if anything, during the short session?
We have already had a couple of informational hearings. Sorry, we've had one's coming up this week. One will be on student debt, but the other one was on apprenticeships and what we can do there. I think there's one concern from labor, just ensuring that whatever we do in terms of apprenticeships is also done under the heading of actually providing good wages and good good experience and making sure that everything's are done really well outlined. At the same time, I know that there is a number of employers out there in the state that just want somebody, needs somebody, they just need a body. So some of the work of our committee is going to be trying to thread that needle. Right now, the big thing for our education system is the consolidation. So for those who don't know, about 10 years ago, the state started working on this through the Board of Regents to consolidate the 12 community colleges and our 4 state colleges into one unified system. There are many professors who are frustrated by this development, seeing it as a way to take autonomy away from these individual locations. At the same time, the governor's office views this as the next step in terms of streamlining our state and ensuring that we have better ways for employment pipelines as well. This is a question, there's no easy answers. This is a question I struggle with in terms of how do we view our education system? Do we view our education system as a lens of edification, through the lens of edification, or do we view it through the lens of creating that worker pipeline? And also to a degree, is it actually bifurcated in that way, or is it a little bit of both? And that's what I believe. I believe that you can use our education system for both reasons, either to advance yourself personally and professionally, or as a way to actually gear yourself towards a job. So my role as committee chair is basically trying to take requests from anybody out there who needs the support of our committee to ensure that down the line, because anything that we do is not going to have a 1 year, 2 year turnaround. It's going to be 5 years, maybe more. So everything that we do is going to be really long-term situated. And so the best thing that we can do is just keep on listening to employers and making sure that through our committee, we're doing the best that we can. I will say to end this that as you mentioned, the committee that I chair is the Higher Education and Employment Advancement Committee. So we have been working with the Office of Workforce Strategy under the governor's office, but I will say that a number of members of the committee, when I took over, expressed interest in really leaning more into the employment advancement aspect of our committee, feeling that there was more that we could do. So the committee is gearing more in that direction. Can I give you specifics right now? No, I cannot, but I can tell you that that is the cap that we're wearing.
Thank you. And I think you're right. It is a long-term kind of viewpoint that the committee has to deal with and balance those competing interests. But that's good to hear. Representative Dillon, I'm gonna jump over to the Environment and Transportation and Climate Initiative. Let me see if I can find you on my, oh, there you are, got it, okay. There's been back and forth surrounding the TCI and whether it'll be reintroduced again this coming session. Do you see this initiative being introduced, or if not, are there other climate incentives that you think might happen this year? You're muted. Thank you. There you go.
You asked me a question and then muted me, so it's a little glitch. Good morning, and thank you very much for inviting us. Well, the environment is very important to our regional economy, actually, and it's also very important in terms of the damage that it can do. It creates opportunity and it creates damage. I guess I supported the governor's TCI last year in committee. I was very dubious about it, to be honest. And I don't know, I think it was a multi-state effort, so it was kind of a yes or no choice. But if you look at some of the greenhouse gas activity in the last 10 years, one of the biggest contributors actually has been SUVs, not necessarily all cars. So I would have been very happy to target SUVs rather than necessarily look at the cost of gasoline to all working people. But that wasn't really before us at the time. There are a number of other sources of climate, which is so urgent, and we've been so reckless. And I really think every area and every town maybe should be looking at what the sources of greenhouse gases can be that may sound very small. And I'll give an example. One particular interest of mine that I couldn't engage the previous governor in was the future of retail and what we would do at the malls, because it seemed 10 years ago that we were moving. Some of the malls across the country, and I know IKEA has been a leader in this, have been putting solar panels on the top of their buildings. I think we have some opportunities, and I know that there are sectors of our business community that may be nervous about the threats to their own work, but it seems to me that we should be looking at some of those big box stores, and that's just it sounds small, but if you're, let's say, the mayor of New Haven or the mayor of Meriden or Bridgeport, and your local people can be looking at all the potential sources of opportunity, but also where our activities are generating. I think the gasoline is a major contributor, but there's a lot of other issues going on as well. And it's an exciting time, but it's not easy to get consensus, as you can see, even within our own state, regionally.
Thank you. I'm gonna, since we're sort of talking about the environment, I'm gonna talk a little bit and look to, let's see, retaining residents and support for the arts, which I think sort of goes together. So I'm gonna first talk to Representative Parker. Arts, culture, and tourism industry are vital to New Haven and the region. As one of the leaders in the ACT caucus, what steps do you think will further support these industries, and can their funding be protected in this current session coming up?
Thanks, Jim. And thanks everyone for having us this morning. I am happy to give my take on that, and then maybe we can also hear from my colleague, Representative Brenda Borer, who is the House co-chair of the Arts, Culture, Tourism Caucus, and has been doing some really great work on this front. The legislature directed $30 million over the next 2 years to support the arts and culture side of the puzzle, and about another $10 million in additional funding support tourism efforts. And those have been historic investments that have made a big difference in the industry. Certainly there's a little bit further to go potentially in making sure that everyone is getting access to that support. And it's a complex sector when it comes down to individuals and businesses and all the different ways that arts, culture, humanities, and tourism play in our lives. But we're in a strong position now to really think strategically about the future. And I think that's the opportunity for this session. Historically, funding for arts, culture, and tourism has sort of gone up and down and not been pegged as well to the outcomes it can have on our state from a workforce perspective, from an educational perspective, certainly from economic development and all the many areas that this work touches. So what I'm excited about is to see if we can really partner with folks at DECD in the Office of the Arts and the Office of Tourism to develop a strategic approach to the next couple of years of funding and supporting the sector. They've done awesome work, especially this year in the way that the Office of the Arts has partnered with Connecticut Humanities to manage a big, quick grant process that's been really supportive and expansive. And so I think we've got some strong groundwork that's going to tee us up for the future. To your question, I certainly hope we can find better ways to provide equitable funding and funding that is understandable and practical over the long term, so that folks in their organizations sort of know what's coming and what they can plan around. I think that's our opportunity over the next few years, and I think there's a really strong bipartisan coalition of folks that are going to be working on it.
Great. Thank you. I know, just as a personal comment, in my town there was an empty storefront, and our local arts group is temporarily renting it and is having local artists show their work and art shows. And at first, to be honest, my first thought was, well, this is, using retail space. It's wonderful, and it creates a great draw for folks to come into the center of my town and go to restaurants and other shops. So a big proponent of the arts, because it really does draw all kinds of commerce and folks from, out of the state who come through our various towns and they see these things and they spend, their money there, which is good for our economy. So before I go to Representative Boer, who I want to ask about the arts as well as bonding, I want to jump to Representative Smith because the arts discussion also talks about the fact we've seen an influx of people moving into Connecticut, particularly along the shorelines. What are some of the ways the legislature can optimize the funding coming into the state to further economic development and retain these residents in the New Haven area? We see it, folks coming up from Fairfield County, folks coming from New York. Part of it was pandemic and part of it was, I think, just, sort of a change for people that wanted to be here. Could you speak to that?
Thank you very much, Mr. Brito, and thank you for the invitation today. The arts culture, which Representative Parker was just elaborating on, is a critical and I think necessary not only to the economic vibrancy of the community, but in terms of the enrichment of the population. It is really what represents our waking hours aside from our working time. There are a number of things that are attractive, especially in a coastal community, to tie into this. And I think a lot of that perhaps hasn't been explored to the full extent that it could be. Arts and culture and the development of tourism in our area also touches on some housing issues, availability of rental space, things of that nature. And as I said, with the dislocation arising from COVID, all of these things have been thrown into disarray, and it's been difficult to organize things that involve the arts and different types of community ventures. I would certainly support, and I'm hoping to solicit more federal involvement in this. Another aspect of this that is important has an environmental component too, especially in our area. Milford has the longest Long Island Sound shoreline of any of the communities in Connecticut. Coastal resiliency being something not a long-term environmental challenge, but something that is on us, that is starting to happen now. And I've been working with the federal level in terms of trying to provide for and working with DEEP here in the state to follow through with a number of projects that will affect, I think, the attractiveness of our area, especially as a coastal community, and trying to forestall what seems to be something now based on climate change that will be affecting the shoreline communities and all of the amenities that go with it. So I will be working and have been working with both our House representative and our Senate delegation in terms of getting, I know we have a number of dredging projects going on. I'm working on several shoreline remediation projects here in Milford that will help to preserve that beachfront area. If you go through Milford in the summertime, it is thanks to a lot of the community groups usually replenishing a lot of the arts, music festivals, different types of arts shows, exhibits, and it's a very vibrant and very practical and appreciated amenity for the people in Milford. I hope that trying to maintain those areas that are threatened as a shoreline community is important to all of this and to promoting tourism and visitation from people outside of our district, outside of our area. I know he said we've lost population. I think with the pandemic and with some of the complications from that, we've actually seen a lot of people moving back in the real estate market here in Southern Connecticut reflects that. But I think it's a multi-tier front. I hope to work on it both in the environmental, the housing, and also in terms of in attracting new investment in this area, particularly through arts, culture, and tourism.
Thank you. With that, I'm gonna, before I get to taxes, which no one likes to talk about, I'm gonna jump to Representative Boer so she can comment on some of the topics we just went through before and then get into bonding. So if my bonding question to you is, you're chair of the bonding subcommittee, can you give us some insight into the work that will be put out during the session? And also, if you'd like to comment on both the arts and coastal resiliency, because you're in West Haven, which also has that issue, feel free.
So much to talk about. So I think Representative Parker and Representative Smith really laid out some of our challenges, but our opportunities around arts, culture, and tourism. And we really need to look at them together and not in silos. As Representative Parker mentioned, this is the first time in a very long time we were able to allocate significant funding for this arena. And we know for every dollar that we invest into this arts, culture, and tourism, there's a $3 return on investment. So we have to look at our funding as not as an expense in the budget, but really as an investment in the budget. And one of the things we've been talking about is how do we make sure that funding through those grants, through the arts, are really accessible to all. So how are we getting that information out there so everybody has an equal opportunity to tap into those funds? And then once we do that, how do we streamline the whole process, right? The application process is cumbersome. We really need to work on that as well. And, you know, we know arts is not only an economic driver, but it's the mental health benefits is clear, and it's a healing tool, right? We all feel good when we're exposed to the arts. So we need that more than ever right now. So with respect to bonding, and I forgot to say thank you for having us and hosting us today. I did want to acknowledge that. So if we take a step back and we think about 2019 and 2020, the governor had put us on a debt diet. And the purpose of putting us on that debt diet was really to take a step back and pause and allow us to be in a better position in the future to be able to bond. And this is the future. So now we are in a better position, and that coupled with the improvement in the revenues consensus, because bonding is a percentage of the revenue consensus, we had a really robust bipartisan 2021 bond bill. And much of those funds were allocated in 2021, but we'll see more of that allocated in 2022. The bond bill is like the budget. You put it together in the long session, and then you really just tweak it in the short session. So we don't put together a whole new bond bill. So we're still building and allocating from last year's bond bill. But some of the areas you asked specifically how they relate into the workforce. Some of the line items that we had in that bond bill were really key. We had funding in there for harbor dredging, specifically for the New Haven Harbor. We know that the New Haven Harbor is, I think, the second largest harbor in New England. So this funding will help to widen and deeper the harness, which will ultimately tie into commerce and jobs. We put significant funding to invest in our state colleges and our state universities. We invested over $20 million for their needs. And I saw President Joe on earlier, Top Owl over there at Southern. We did that based on the feedback from the universities. Our school construction, we put in significant funding so that our schools around the state have state-of-the-art facilities and resources to allow our students to succeed. In the environment arena, we put together, we allocated significant funding around brownfield remediation and clean water funds, which those are not only key to health of our community, but they really act as a springboard for development because, you know, investors look at our infrastructure when they're looking to come to Connecticut. We put funding in transportation. We had the new Small Business Express program came through the bond bill. We had allocated another $7 million towards the Manufacturing Assistance Act to allow for manufacturers to apply through DECD for funding. And then in the bond bill, we didn't just have brick and mortar allocations. We also looked at mental health. We put $25 million towards looking at health disparities, making sure there's equal access to mental health and substance abuse in our communities. And then we had a whole host of Urban Act grant projects that were funded in cities throughout the New Haven region. But one of the key, and finally, I could talk about bonding all day long. One of the key new programs that we developed in the bond bill was the Community Investment Fund. And what that is it's a new structure. It's called the Community Investment Fund 2030. It's a new structure that's going to provide significant funding to municipalities most in need. And it's a different process for accessing those fundings. And it's $175 million per year through 2030. And that is going to kick off on July 1st. So there's a lot of exciting opportunity to come. Our committee is going to be meeting very soon to start discussing what changes we need to make to the bond bill. But I think we're going to see a lot of more key investments in our economy through the bonding.
Great, thank you. Again, before I get to taxes, I see that Representative Reyes has joined us. And since you're talking about all this funding program, I'm wondering if he could speak to the state's initiative, the Minority Business Initiative, and what steps the legislature will take to further that and support that in this coming year. See if I can see him here.
Hey,
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Perito. Good morning, everybody. It's good to see everybody, even though it's virtually. It's always nice for me to associate with my good friends in New Haven. I had the pleasure of working at Sargent Manufacturing for almost 3 decades, so have a lot of friends in the greater New Haven area. And thank you for the opportunity to speak on workforce development and especially as it relates to minorities. So the emphasis on all our workforce development is to be obviously to put equity and inclusion in everything that we do in the hiring practice. And one of our focuses has been to make sure that there's funding dollars being associated and allocated throughout the state on a variety of different fronts. And one of our charge from the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus is to make sure that it's distributed equitably amongst all folks. I was happy to hear Representative Boer speak on the Community Investment Fund, which was a big one. What I believe that one that's going to level the playing field when it comes to investing even more money into those areas that have been somewhat forgotten and or overlooked. And so I'm especially excited about the Community Investment Fund 2030. And I see that the municipalities and towns that have been overlooked for years and decades will eventually be able to get specific projects because it is absolutely targeted for those particular areas. But to talk about the workforce that we're talking about here for the state of Connecticut, even though the unemployment is low, some of the jobs that still go unfilled have a lot to do with the low pay, and I think that it's an area that we need to look at. We still need to continue to make our jobs that are paying good wages, so that we can afford to live in this beautiful state of Connecticut. And I just wanted to be complimentary here. Because she's on, not only because she's on, but our labor chair, Representative Porter, has been a fierce fighter for the workforce. And I just wanted to make sure that she knew that I am extremely proud of the work that she's done for the state of Connecticut and the workforce. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for commenting. Okay, now we get to go to taxes, our favorite subject. I'm going to start with Representative Scanlon. It's good to see you. You've in the past mentioned child tax credits as a priority for this session. Can you talk more about what that will look like and any other tax relief that you think is going to happen this session?
I love talking about taxes, Jim. It's 9:30 in the morning. Let's go. Let's have a conversation. So
you talk about let's go. You're at the airport. You could jump on a plane whenever you want. So you could always go.
Well, good morning. Good morning, everybody. You've been hearing from a lot of people, so I'll try to keep this brief. But listen, here's the deal. We need to do tax reform this session. And I think there's bipartisan consensus about that. The Republicans have ideas. I've got ideas. The governor's got ideas. We actually have to do it, though. And we have to make it meaningful. And it should be structural change. It shouldn't be just gimmicky things for election year politics. All of us are running for election this year. But we have to resist the temptation just to do the political thing. We need to do the right thing. And in the last 2 years, we've seen some serious problems that COVID has exposed. And one of them, and one of the biggest truisms out there, is that middle class and working class people pay a disproportionate share of taxes. Obviously, parents are a big part of that, which is why I've been fighting for the creation of an extended child tax credit here in Connecticut. There was a federal tax credit that was going for about 6 months, but that went away with Build Back Better. And I'm sorry to disagree with my friend, Representative Comey, but I am not optimistic that that is going to get across the finish line anytime soon, given the dysfunction of Washington. So all the more reason why I believe that we need to step up here. We shouldn't limit ourselves just to the child tax credit or the earned income tax credit. We need to think about broad-based tax reform. And so as chair of the Finance Committee, it's going to be my job this session to sort of sit down, get different ideas from both sides of the aisle, from the governor, and create a tax package that I think is comprehensive in a number of different things, whether it's looking at small business taxes, taxes on property tax or the car tax, any number of those things, and really craft a big tax package to change the tax code here in Connecticut to benefit the little guy, the small business owner, the working class single mom like the one that raised me in Guilford, or the middle class family who's got a couple kids and is trying to get by with the increased cost of goods due to inflation. So all in all, I'm excited, Jim. I'm sorry. I know people are usually pretty bummed on taxes, but I actually think we have a very rare opportunity to do something really big and really historic here this session. And I'm hopeful that my colleagues will join me in that effort.
Okay. Thank you. Representative Candelora, as the only Republican here on the group this morning.
I don't know what happened.
You get
today.
the first shot. Go ahead.
I have to chat with my caucus members, but no, I agree with what Sean is saying, and I think I'm glad to hear his interest in getting the bipartisan conversation going on the taxes. It certainly is going to be a good political tool, I think, for either party to sort of run on that in November. But it is important to make sure we get it right. While there's a lot of surplus right now, and there's an opportunity. I go back to the fact we have to look at the long-term structural issues that we still have, and the unfunded liabilities are hanging over our heads. So the good work that we did on a bipartisan basis with the volatility cap and the spending cap and the revenue caps that give rise to these surpluses, how can we make them better so that they're not just generating money, but it actually is truly going to reduce our unfunded liabilities? And I think we do have to take a broad-based approach. COVID did change families, and hopefully it's short-term, but there have been a lot of challenges, as Sean references, for childcare in particular. And I think that can be improved without tax reform. I think we've got to look at the workforce, how we license them. It's very onerous, the process for a daycare worker to go through to get licensed in Connecticut. For $15 or $16 an hour, they're just not going to do it. And so we've got to work on that shortage. But for the taxes, absolutely. And we have to pay attention to Main Street, because back in 2008, when we saw our deficit, we ignored the unemployment compensation fund. And if you talk to the experts now, that slowed Connecticut's economic recovery. So making sure that doesn't happen again, I think, is going to be important.
Okay. I'll open it up. Anyone else want to weigh in on some of the priorities on the tax issue? Garrett's going to help me if I don't see your hands up. No? Okay. How about sort of following up on what Representative Candelora said about the wage issue that's going on too, and the licensing. How about the workforce that's in the nursing homes or the home care? Our population is aging. I know from my own family's experience, it's very difficult to get workers that are available and trained to come into a home for elderly. The goal is to keep the elderly in their homes, since that seems to be the best route for many of them if they don't need more intensive medical care. Do we see any initiatives on that in this coming session? Again, open to anybody.
I think one of the issues that we've been, I'm sort of on the insurance committee, and one of the issues that we continue to not give up on is the long-term healthcare insurance that's become very costly. And it's become a real sort of sticking point in that the insurance that folks had bought 20 years ago has become so incredibly expensive. And part of that is sort of the model of the insurance, but also that we have really, really high cost of healthcare for folks. And so, you know, in the insurance committee, we are focused on, you know, not giving up on that and continuing to have the conversations. We've got a forum coming up that we're going to bring all the stakeholders together and try to come to some solutions that are consumer friendly, and also allow us to keep seniors in their homes and not use our most costly services of nursing homes and things like that.
Thank you. I know that Representative Dillon, you had your hand up, so I'll let you weigh in on that.
Yes, I did want to thank you for raising the issue, Jim, because one of the things that this pandemic has done, because of the characteristics of this particular pathogen, is it's redefined what it means to be a high-risk worker. All of a sudden, a healthcare worker is a high-risk job. In California, some of the earliest deaths were cooks. They were people who were working in the restaurants when everyone was getting takeout, and they couldn't keep their masks on. There's no social distancing. Many of them had no health insurance. People who were delivering the food. I don't know if we know yet what the impact is going to be. And I do want to differ with my dear friends who think that unemployment is a great deal and so forth. We don't know yet what the impact of long COVID is on our workforce. We're still looking at it. There's some people who really have difficulty focusing when they get back to work, and that could be up to 10% of our workforce, and in concentrated industries. I'm concerned about this region because we're very reliant on the service economy, but we also have a terrific research in this region and in this state to be able to look. There are already people looking at the impacts of long COVID. They're tracking people over at the med school and over at the hospital. They're two initiatives that are separate. So I think we have opportunities to learn about that and see how it's going to restructure, but we have to make sure that we're protecting people too. And thank you very much for raising that, because that's going to have a ripple effect on families. And if you lose one of the people who's working in your home, then that affects your ability to keep your home. If everybody was relying on you, so that, and there are some exciting initiatives coming forward from the state on helping people to keep their homes, but that all of this is going to have a ripple effect. So I'm a little bit more cautious than some other folks because I'm not sure that we know yet what all of this is going to do. But thank you for your thoughtful questions.
Thank you. Representative Porter, I see you have your hand up.
Thank you, Jim. And just real quick, I mean, thank you for the question. Absolutely. You know, we're talking about nursing homes and the workers, and I just want to emphasize the fact that, you know, they are essential. And we call them essential. I think all workers are essential, as a matter of fact. No profit, no business without workers. But these workers have been deemed essential because of the work they do, and that they weren't able to work remotely. As Representative Dillon said, there was no social distancing. You know, my sister actually works in one of these nursing homes in New Haven, and she's had COVID twice. And we've had it because we're a family, and, you know, it passed through the household. But the thing I want to really harp on is the fact that the cost to them and their families, right? We have to balance that. We have workers that have clients that they take to hospitals to get services that have benefits and coverage. And these same workers don't have benefits, can't go to a hospital, have children, have no way to, you know, unless they go to the emergency room, right? They're in the ED. So we have to bring some equity and some supports to them around retention. I mean, the work that they do, they're certified, they're qualified, they're experienced. There's relationships that are involved in this kind of work that keep the residents in these nursing homes stable, keep their families stable. If they're doing well, the family members are doing well. And we need to make sure that they have a working sustainable wage, that they have health care benefits, and that they have some kind of retirement package when they leave this job. Many of them have 20 and 30 years in, and now they don't know what tomorrow holds for them. So I just want to put the emphasis on workers as well as the residents and the families that they care for. Thank you.
Thank you. That's important. I think everyone, every family faces that, either with the elderly person that's in a nursing home or an elderly person that they're trying to keep at their home or at the elderly person's home. It's a real issue. Tamika, I see you have your hand up. Did you mean to? No.
Jim, I'll jump in with a
Okay,
question we have here. And I'll direct this to Representative Reyes. And Representative Reyes, we in our legislative agenda, we've included inclusive growth. And one of the questions we have here is, with all these different workforce programs, this really piles on to what we're just talking about. How do we ensure that those get to our urban communities, to our diverse communities throughout the state, and that they actually work for them, not that just that they're aimed there, but that the results are there as well?
Thank you very much for the question and the opportunity. That's exactly the legislative intent of this particular dollars and funding, is that what we're looking for is, and I like the way you framed the question, is that's exactly what we're looking for. We want accountability. We want to see that where these dollars are actually being distributed, that they're actually showing the benefit to our communities that have been largely overlooked in many cases and underinvested. So the way you frame the question is exactly the legislative intent, to make sure that where that funding goes, that those folks are accountable to that community and to those folks that live in that community. So it's an excellent question. It's exactly the legislative intent of that bill.
Thanks. And anyone else want to jump in on that?
I'll just add that there needs to be some kind of checks and balances to make sure that that accountability is in place and working, and that we are actually, tracking funding, tracking how it's being used, tracking who has access, and I mean real access, able to jump through the loops and the qualifiers to get where they need to get in order to acquire funding. So I think that we have to do a better job in making sure that the intent is actually implemented.
Thanks, Robin. And I was working off of Howard's question, and I see Howard's got his hand raised. So Howard, if you wanted to jump in.
Sure. Thank you, Garrett, and thank you for asking the question. I would like to follow up on, as the intentions are very well. I think Representative Scallon said it earlier. He talked about structural change when he was referring to taxes. As we allocate and distribute funds to reach our goals of inclusive growth and things of that nature, how do we intend, or let's see, how can I put this without being offensive? How can we ensure that our intentions are going to be met when the structures haven't changed? And what are you doing about the actual structures in order to ensure that the change that we seek is made? Or have we thought about creating a new structure, designing a structure that works for the people that you're trying to reach? Now, I'm saying that specifically because when you think about some communities, there's been disinvestment for so long, and the communities have not grown at all. The country has moved forward, but the people haven't moved forward. Yet we're trying to make investments assuming that they're on a certain level, and they're not necessarily on a certain level. So I believe that the structures would need to be different. Have you thought about investing in different structures in order to accommodate the people?
Well, Jim, if I can just chime in here, I think that's a great question, Howard. And I think that the important thing for us to think about, to level set this conversation, is there's a lot of people who want to get back to normal, but normal was not working for a lot of people before COVID. And so for us in government, I think the thing that we have to focus on is taking a look at every single program we have right now, and saying, and evaluate whether it's working for the new normal or the normal that we want to build here in Connecticut. And doing things the way we were doing even 2 years ago doesn't make sense anymore because the world is dramatically different than it was in March of 2020 when we started this. And so it's hard for us as a legislature of 187 people to do that, but I think it's incumbent upon every one of us, especially the chairs of the committees, as I am, to take a look within our purview of what exists and what can we do better. For me, that's taxes, right? For Robin, that might be something else. For everybody else, that might be something else. But for me, that's the prism through which I think we need to start looking at things here in Connecticut, is how can we make government be more adaptive to where we actually are as a world? And that's what I hope we will focus on this session and beyond.
I see, I see Representative Winlander's hand is up, so let's let her weigh in on that.
Thank you. I just wanted to build off of the question. Thank you, Mr. Hill, for that, and Rep. Scanlon for, I think, coming from right now, I'm lucky enough to serve on a very small subcommittee that is looking at creating better access to mental health resources and behavioral health resources that the speaker alluded to when he spoke earlier. We are not just looking at access to care, we're looking at the structural basis of it. How can we attract and retain the providers, the clinicians that we need? And one of the ways that we are looking at that is creating a different system. And we're looking at tuition reimbursement programs. We are looking at job employment, like placement positions. We're looking at all of these different options, but we're also doing it through a lens, looking at not just need-based assistance for tuition reimbursement or scholarship programs or grant programs, but also through the lens of identifying communities and demographics that have been marginalized and aren't at that level yet where they should be, so everyone is on that equal playing field, so that when we have access to grants, everyone has the ability to apply. So we're trying to reset, at least with that industry, ways that we can provide opportunities and change sort of systemic basis to it. And if that is successful, perhaps we can start looking at different industries in the same way and providing those opportunities.
Thank you. Representative Kindler, I see your hand is up, so I'll go to you and then Representative Reyes.
Yeah, I'll be quick. And it's a great question. It's a great point, Mr. Hill. And you know, the Community Investment Fund that was alluded to, that structure that was created sort of points to, I think, how systemically government needs to change. So much of our funding and decision-making is not only made in silos, but it really is centralized around the governor's office, and then it flows downward. And I think that some of the structures we put in place have to be more broad-based, bringing the stakeholders to the table when the decisions are made. And I think Mary's alluding to that as well when it comes to mental health. We don't communicate across the systems when we're delivering mental health. And so everything is sort of done in silos, and it's inequitable in that sense, and it's inadvertent. It was just created that way. And so I think when it comes to transportation, we need to look at a transportation authority that's making broad-based decisions for the state of Connecticut, not having it really driven through the bond commission, where it becomes highly political and it depends on who is sitting on that commission at any given point in time. That's how decisions are made sometimes. And I might think that an investment in North Branford in my community is the best thing in the world, and I'm going to fight hard for it, but it might not be the best use of our resources. And so I think broadening the decision making is the way we begin the structural change.
Thank you. Representative Reyes.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to respond to Mr. Hill, and there's no, he was looking at how he was framing that question, and sometimes we just have to ask the hard question and just put it out there. And we as Black and Puerto Rican members of the legislature have had that same thought, Mr. Hill, and we agree that some of the structures are not fair. And to that point, I wanted you and others to be on the meeting to know that the checks and balances sometimes don't work, and that's what we're calling out. So the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus has actually asked the governor to take a look at every single one of those dollars that are allocated into communities, and to make sure that our communities and our workers are not forgotten. And this is all recent action. And a case in point is the dollars that go to the Department of Transportation. How does that drill down to benefits in our community? Same thing with DECD and same thing with DEP. And I have a little bit better understanding of DEP because that's the arena in which I like to work in, which is using my environmental background. And I need to see those dollars work in my community. So the question is well framed. We're questioning and challenging those very same structures. And we agree that sometimes those channels are not working. And I have not come to the conclusion that we need another structure or a different channel, but we have challenged the question that is what we have in place working. So I appreciate the question. Thank you very much, Mr. Perillo.
Representative Porter, I see, is your hand still up?
Yes, I did raise it just to chime in on this because, I agree with a lot of what's been said, but I think the thing that we really need to be mindful of is, the structures and the systems are not fair, but let's be honest, it's been intentional. These structures operate a certain way in, one part of the state according to zip code, and they work another way in another zip code according to what it is. So I think that we have to talk about build back, bottom up, because the people closest to the problems are closest to the solutions. And I think that's where a lot of this has we've allowed it to continue and be exacerbated. And the pandemic has helped with that because it really has highlighted what is going on in Black and Brown communities that has always went on in Black and Brown communities. So we're going to have to keep it real around what the root causes are, and we deal with the root causes. And we absolutely have to have a structural change. We know that the system is rigged, and you can look at the way wealth pans out, not just in this state, but we're in Connecticut, so we can talk about that. And how do we make it equitable? And how do we make tax legitimate? We need to be talking about legitimacy and what really works. And you can take a look at, the areas where it is working and just overlay that in the areas where it's not. We've got to get away from substandard education, a substandard workforce, substandard pay. And we have to lift from the bottom, because when we lift from the bottom, everyone's elevated and we know who the people on the bottom are. So I think you go straight to the problem, straight to the source, and you pluck it from the root, and we all benefit. So I just wanted to put that out in response to Mr. Hill's question. You're absolutely right. It is structural. It is intentional. It must be changed if we're serious about, equity, diversity, inclusion, all these words we throw around. Then we have to be real about the work we do to get it done. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Bora, real quick, because we want to jump to sort of closing up on a little bit of transportation. So if you want to jump into this.
Sure. Yep. I just wanted to put a final point on the community investment fund. Will address exactly what Representative Candelori had mentioned, that it's a different structure for approving these projects. It has to come from the chief elected officials so that there's skin in the game, and they are recommending projects they'd like to see for their community. But I just wanted to make a different point on federal funding. I wanted to, for anybody listening, just remind everybody that our communities are getting significant ARPA funds from the federal government to address all of these things that we're talking about. And most of these communities are looking for public input. So I strongly encourage everyone to bring those ideas and make your voice be heard to your local leaders, because the funding is there for mental health benefits, to help our seniors, to help with clean water, broadband, small business grants. That's what that funding is for. So in addition to our state funding, we have a significant infusion of federal funds coming in that we have to tap into.
Thank you. Garrett, I saw you sent me a text about some of the nonprofits asking questions. Do you want to raise that?
Sure, I'll just jump in. One question we've had in the chat, and I know this is a big issue coming up, so I do want to just give it some time, even though we're running close here. With retirements coming up at the state, already we have a lot of work that's being done by our nonprofits, and we've got a few questions in the chat about whether those rates are going to be raised for the work that our nonprofits do when they're doing state work, and if you expect more of that work to be going to nonprofits as we deal with a potential tsunami of state retirements. Anyone want to jump in on that? I think I see Representative Dillon. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I'll just say very quickly that we've been underfunding the nonprofits for years. So I wouldn't want to be shifting work from the state workforce to nonprofits just so we can do it on the cheap. It wouldn't be fair to the families. It wouldn't be fair to the workers, really. One of the stressors that is happening with the nonprofits, in addition to our failure to fund them adequately, is that they are chasing a limited number of people. And some of those people are paying substantial student loans. And so you can't really live with our cost of housing and pay back your debts and make a living on what some of our nonprofits can give you. And I think that that's something that we've discussed in some of our conversations at the Capitol. We'll see what the governor does, but we're really trying to unpack some of the components of this and make sure that we can get it right.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I would just add, I mean, the nonprofits deliver the services phenomenally. And I think they do a better job sometimes than the state does at a much more reasonable price. And so I wouldn't call it that they do it cheaper. I think they're just much more efficient. And I look at an organization like BH Care in Brantford and the services that they provide. They really are holding together, especially through COVID. So many of them, they really were the front lines in keeping everything together. And I do think we have to look at making sure that they're given adequate increases, because they really haven't, and they continue to struggle every single day. And some of the services, I know, John Michael Parker in Madison with Vista, they provide services that get our developmentally disabled back to work and living independently. And if we don't prop those services up, we're going to be paying for it a lot more in the future.
Representative Parker, I see you have your hand up, and so he sort of threw the question over to you as well. So go ahead.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for that, Vinny. Just to echo our understanding and awareness of the challenges that exist on the funding side. I mean, I see a few folks in the chat speaking from Sarah, which does an organization that does great work in my district and across the shoreline in the state. And as Vinny mentioned, Vista, maybe just take a plug to say that these organizations have done a great job of keeping in touch with their legislators and really making us aware of the challenges they see from leadership level and also from folks providing the services. And so, with the 92 participants we have on this call today, really encourage folks to have those direct outreaches, because it helps us be aware of where the gaps are and the real intricacies of how the funding and other pieces tend to play out. It's awesome to hear that there's bipartisan support for better funding these nonprofit services. Obviously, the Alliance is doing a great job sharing that message. And we heard some encouraging leadership from Senator Austin recently about what can be done on the appropriation side. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to increase our investment in support of these organizations in the context of inflation and context of rising costs that are really providing essential services in our community. So we hear the message and hopefully can make some more progress this session.
Thank you. I think we're just about out of time. I'm really glad to hear that you all want to work together this year. I think when there's times when there's some budgetary less constraints, it's a time when suburbs and cities and all representatives can get together and try to set us on a better path and look at some ways to solve some of the systemic problems and inequities that we've had for a long time, because it works to all our benefit if our region grows, and we should make it grow all together. So that chair comment that you get to do. Garrett, I'll throw it back to you.
Great, thanks, Jim. And again, thank you to all of our representatives for joining us this morning. And One topic we didn't spend a lot of time talking about, but I'll just give a plug as a final comment, is transportation. And so we ask all of you to continue to support transportation initiatives for Greater New Haven, continue to support Tweed. We've got some great progress that's been made, but we want to see that solidified. And obviously high-speed rail is another opportunity with the infrastructure dollars. So I know everyone on this call supports that, and we think that's really critical to our economic growth as we move forward. I do just want to remind everyone that our annual legislative agenda is out. There's a link in the chat, so you can use that if you want to take a look. Also, if you're interested in becoming involved in the Government Affairs Committee that Jim chairs, please email Katie Ambrosio, our Public Policy and Communications Specialist. And a big thanks to her for putting together these two programs. She's done a great job, and our entire staff, marketing and communications, to get the word out about what we've been doing. One last thank you to all of our sponsors: AT&T Connecticut, Southern Connecticut State University, Global Partners, Fuss and O'Neill, Halloran Sage, Alexion AstraZeneca, and Story Real Studios. I do want to remind everyone that on Friday, our executive orientation starts. There's still time to join in if you have someone who's looking to get more involved in the region. They're in a senior leadership position. It's a great way to get engaged in the community. And also our internship and career fair will be underway on February 17th. It's in person and online, so two ways to be able to take advantage of it. Again, thank you everyone for joining us. A really special thanks to our state representatives for being here and making this a great conversation. Hope everyone has a great day.